guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my January wrap-up, and I'm actually happy with the amount of books I read. I read a total of 6 books this month, and it's not the entire 10 books that I had planned for January, but you know what? 6 out of 10, 60%, it's a D. I'm going to go with it. But one of the books that I read in January was Cloaked in Shadow by Ben Alderson. This is the first book in the Dragori trilogy, and it is a young adult high fantasy novel. And it follows Zachariah, who, when he and his friends end up being forced to travel to the kingdom of Thessalonina? I keep confusing it with the Greek city, but I'm pretty sure Ben Alderson is Greek, so this makes sense. But this follows Zachariah when he and his friends are forced to travel to the fictional kingdom of Thessalonina. They end up kind of being forced to join the army because they are not normal elves. They are elves that can shift, and the king wants that for his army to fight some big baddies. However, Zachariah doesn't fall under the normal shifter pretense, so he tries to kind of hide that, but it only gets people interested in him because he managed to pass a test that claims him as a shifter, but he is not actually shifting. And that gets the attention of Prince Hadrian. And things ensue, and it's very gay. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars. I did a full-fledged spoiler-free review, which I will link down below for you guys. But essentially, I love this book. Like, I love me, the good coming out book. I love those. But one of my favorite books that I need to read more of, and I think needs to be more normalized, is just subtly queer books. Ones where characters are queer, they're very openly queer, and no one cares. And it adds more to the story, and I really loved how this book was written. I loved the romance between these two boys, and I need the second book already. Literally, this book was so cute, and I loved it so much. And honestly, this book deserves so much more hype than it ever gets because this is a self-published book, so, you know, the hype for those are not very high, but I think that it deserves more hype than some of the actual published works out there for YA. Let's just put that out there. The next book was actually a reread for me, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This follows Nick Carraway, who kind of moves into this new neighborhood. He is new money, but this neighborhood is predominantly old money. And he learns about this mysterious man named Gatsby, and one day he's invited to Gatsby's party and finds out that there is a connection between them that isn't what it seems. We all know the story of Gatsby by now, so I shouldn't have to repeat it. But I ended up reading this because I wanted to start the 2020 off with a bang. Get it? Because of what happens to Gatsby, I'm sorry. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This stands to be one of my favorite classics of all time. There's so much like little symbolisms between all of the actions, the characters, and all this stuff that you can kind of read in as you're continuing to read through the book. I love this book so much, and I love that Tobey Maguire and Leo DiCaprio decided to play them because they're besties in real life, so it just works out for the better. However, I don't get how anyone can see Nick Carraway as straight. Literally, his descriptions are some of the most bisexual descriptions out there. I was reading this and I was like, these are not words of a straight man. Because he was describing Gatsby in such a way that I was like, nope, you can't be straight. But I really enjoyed this book. I definitely made the right choice of reading this book for my first ever read of the year. So, great way to start off the year. The next book that I picked up is another book that was a read-along, because if you guys don't know, Cloaked in Shadow is part of a read-along. This one is for another read-along, and I also made an entire reading vlog on it, and that is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book to the original Grishaverse trilogy. My friends and I on Twitter are reading through the entire series, and then Six of Crows, and then whatever comes after. This follows Alina, who ends up kind of finding out that she is not just a normal person, she is Grisha. She is then thrown into this world where she kind of has to figure out what her powers mean and how she can bring about kind of a change in the world when the Darkling is kind of ruling it, but really I'm not too complaining that the Darkling is ruling the world because he's pretty great. But this book follows the events directly after, a few months after the first book. And here we meet a new cast of characters whom I love dearly. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Really, this book annoyed me more than it actually made me enjoy it. Which is to say something, because the first book I wasn't a big fan of either. The only reason I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars was because of Tolya and Tamar, Zoya, and then Nikolai Lantsov. That's it. That's the review. Everything else, I just got so annoyed with the fact that Mal and Alina are only defined by their relationship with each other, and it's a very codependent kind of relationship. I also don't like the thing that Mal does in the end of this book, which I was just like, you know, I wasn't rooting for you, but I was starting to feel bad for you. Like, if you guys had seen my vlog, I was starting to feel bad for Mal because he was kind of subject to really poor writing, and he would have been a really good love interest otherwise. And then he does a thing, and I just want him to be eaten by a Volcra. Literally, my ships are now Darkling and Nikolai, Alina and Zoya, and Mal and the Volcra. There was also a scene in this book which really rubbed me the wrong way. It was a slight spoiler, but I feel like everyone has read this book by now. Mal and Alina kind of go undercover to enjoy a festival, and it really kind of pokes fun at a lot of like the fortune teller like culture. They kind of mock the accent, and I had originally read it as they were mocking like the Romani culture, because this is based in like kind of like the Eastern like European mythology, primarily more Russia, but you can tell there's some other aspects in there. But then my friend TB from TB Writer, or TB Kane, pointed out that he read it as more as like Southeast Asian, and then like the Suli aren't even on the map. They're literally POC, and they were made fun of, and like the only scene that they appeared in. And then at the end of the book, literally anyone who was like a non-white Grisha died. And then the only two non-white characters that we had were religious fanatics. So I don't know. Literally the only reason I gave it a 3.5 was because I got to see more of the world. And then Nikolai literally broke his freaking back carrying the entirety of this book. I am finishing the series out. I'm in the middle of the third one right now. There are some improvements, but I'm still just like, what was this book? Quite literally. Like, if Nikolai was not in this book, if Zoya, Tolia, and Tamar were not in this book, 1. It would have gotten a 1 star. And I don't give 1 stars. The next book that I read for January is actually one that I'm very happy that I finally got to. Kind of. It was an uphill battle trying to get me to read this book. And that is The Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 6th book to the Throne of Glass series. And it basically follows the events of Empire Storms, but through Cale's perspective in a completely other country, while he kind of struggles through his own trauma and his own disabilities that happen from Queen of Shadows. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. If y'all know me, you know that Cale and I have been at a disagreement. I understand his character progression and all that stuff, but sometimes the boy just makes decisions where I'm like, are you thinking with your head, or are you thinking with the melon on the table? He's not even thinking with his southern hemisphere head. It's just his head, his brain, or like whatever's on the table. I was really hesitant to get into this book. I finally picked it up because I was like, I don't know what else to read, and I loved it. I think that this one really characterizes Cale a lot. It brings a lot more to his character. We see a lot of like his trauma and like him getting over that, as well as him realizing that his ability to help his friends is not just tied to him being physically able to do something. And then we get to learn more about Nesrin, who we met in Empire Queen of Shadows. And we see a lot more of like her own kind of like struggles living in Adarlan as a woman guard. We see a lot more of her struggles with her family and like see her kind of find her place in this world. And then we also met Sartak, and Sartak is a cute fangirling little bean that I adore so much. And I just want to protect him and make sure he's safe and fine. I just feel like this really gave me a lot of insight to Cale's character that I had not otherwise. You really see his love for Dorian and Aileen, despite the things that he had done that kind of went against them, if that makes sense. And this made me fall in love with his character all over again, because I really did enjoy him like the first 2 books. We've been at odds ever since, so. I just wish that the covers matched the other ones. Like, whoever decided to illustrate this cover or design this cover did not realize that they could just put a boy on the cover and have it match. And then Yrene. Yrene was also such a cutie pie. Like, I just loved all the characters in this book, even the guys that were supposed to be bad, or like, not bad, but not good either. I loved them all. So I'm really excited to pick up the 7th book. When that will be, I'm not entirely sure, because I have a long TBR to get through. The next book is another book that I have been kind of hesitant to pick up, and that is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the sequel to The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and essentially follows Jude Duarte after she and her sisters have been kidnapped by the Fae. Her eldest sister is half Fae. Vivi's father, biological father, comes in, kills her family, and takes the girls and puts them in the Fae. She and her twin sister, Taryn, are humans, and the Fae kind of see us as playthings, which I don't blame them, because we're kind of shitty, so just like, destroy our lives, please. This book follows the series 5 months after the first book. And we see Jude kind of start to play in this world that she really had no part in being, and kind of try to figure out how she can be a political figure in a world that doesn't really respect her. I was really hesitant to pick up this book because I did not like Cruel Prince all that much. I enjoyed it, but I struggled with Jude as a character. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I think in terms of Cruel Prince to Wicked King is probably my favorite out of the 3. I haven't even read Queen of Nothing yet. I think that we see more of Jude, and while she remains to be a character that I just don't understand. And it's so stupid because she brags about how she knows the Fae. She's like, I grew up in the Fae. I know the Fae. I can play your games. And then someone went up to her and she's like, oh my god, I didn't see this coming. And I'm like, were you just not 5 pages ago saying, yeah, I know the Fae. I can play their games. I'm basically a Fae. I really like Cardan. I think Cardan is assholey dumb character who has accepted his fate. He's accepted that he's an asshole, that he's stupid, but there are so many layers to him that I think that gets missed out from the first book, and I really enjoyed it. My only critique was that, again, Jude is a stubborn dumbass, and I'm just like, why? And then I don't understand how the Fae world interacts with the human world. I can't tell if it's Cassandra Clare, where the Fae realm is literally underground, and they're in the same universe, just hidden, or if this is a parallel universe thing where you have to cross a threshold and then you're in the Fae realm. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited for Queen of Nothing, but we're also really nervous because there have been mixed reviews. So I will probably pick that up along with Kingdom of Ash when I get through this mountain of a TBR that I have for myself. Then the last book that I read in the month of January is another favorite of mine. Literally, I feel like January has set a precedent for the rest of the reads that I'll be reading in 2020. And I'm going to be very disappointed if somehow it takes a dip, because all these books, with the exception of Siege and Storm, have literally been amazing and probably will end up on my top 10 of 2020, if not honorable mentions, because we're literally just in January. But that book is After the Flood by Cassandra Montag. This is an adult post-apocalyptic world where we follow Myra and Pearl, who is her daughter, as they kind of have to work their way through this world post-flood, trying to get her daughter Ro, who was kind of traumatically taken away from them during the events of a flood that happened, another flood that happened, I think 13 years ago. And it kind of poses the question of if you had to choose between saving a child and potentially losing the other, would you do it? I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. I have a full-length review, spoiler-free, down below with all the things that I had. I really enjoyed this book. This was a recommendation to me from Jessie from Bow Ties and Books. Like I said in my review, I think that this has a lot of those, morality questions, a lot of questions that people would never think they would ever have to do, but sometimes you end up having to do them. Even not in a post-apocalyptic world, sometimes people have to make those decisions now. So I think that was really important. That was a really nice touch to it, that you could somehow relate that back to today. I like the complex relationships. I like this complex world. I loved Pearl. Pearl is one of my favorite characters. She's just this little ray of light in this world that you didn't think would ever have existed, but she does. And literally, this is going to be one of my favorite reads of 2020, hands down. So I highly recommend you pick this up. I will leave, like I said, my review down below. And then I'll also be leaving my Goodreads review down below, because in that review, my video review, I had neglected to mention any content and trigger warnings, so I had to add that into the Goodreads review, so you guys have that for you. So click on that before you click on the review, but the review is linked within the Goodreads review, so you're not going to be lost in translation. But that is it for my January wrap-up. Again, a lot of really good books this month. I am really excited. I feel like I've set a precedent for myself, a really high expectation that the rest of the books that I read this year are going to be just as good, if not even better. Like I said, all the reviews will be linked down below, and as well as anything with content warnings, I will have left those in the Goodreads reviews. So if I didn't mention them in this video, they're in the Goodreads reviews, so just check that out. Other than that, hit like, subscribe, comment. You guys know all the fun stuff. And then what books did you guys end up reading in January that were either probably going to make it on your favorite of 2020, disappointing of 2020, or legit really just surprised you? Let me know. And suggest any books to me. But until next time, I will talk to you guys in the comments and social media. And I hope you guys are having a great week, and if not, hopefully the next week is even better for you. Until then, bye!